On December 14th, 1878, Princess Alice of the United Kingdom died of diphtheria at Darmstadt, aged just 35. The second daughter of Queen Victoria had lived through tragedy, loss, and the demands of royal duty. Yet in her brief life, Alice had become the matriarch of one of Europe's most consequential royal family trees. 7 children survived her death, though not for long in every case. Their fates would reshape the map of European monarchy. One child would become Empress of Russia, another would rule a German Grand Duchy. A third would marry into the Prussian imperial family. 2 would die in childhood from disease and accident. Their descendants would sit on thrones, face revolution, and help determine the course of 20th-century history. This is the complete account of what happened to Princess Alice's 7 children. Each life will be traced from birth through death, from childhood through legacy. The story begins not with drama, but with facts. Princess Alice was born on April 25, 1843, as the second daughter and third child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Her position within the British royal family placed her at the intersection of traditional monarchy and the progressive educational theories that Prince Albert championed throughout his involvement in British cultural and social development. At 19, Alice married Louis IV, future Grand Duke of Hesse, and by Rhine on July 1, 1862, in a ceremony at Osborne House that was deliberately modest due to mourning for Prince Albert's death 6 months earlier. The wedding marked the beginning of Alice's transition from British royal daughter to German sovereign princess, a change that would profoundly influence her approach to royal duty and family life. Alice established her household at the new palace in Darmstadt according to progressive principles that reflected both Prince Albert's educational theories and her own observations of social conditions in both Britain and Germany. Unlike the formal, ceremonially focused upbringing typical of royal children, Alice's system emphasized character development, practical skills, and direct engagement with social realities. Her children would receive comprehensive educations that included modern languages, natural sciences, history, and literature, but also practical domestic skills, basic medical training, and regular exposure to charitable work among ordinary families. This approach prepared them for adult responsibilities while developing empathy and understanding of social conditions beyond court society. Alice insisted that her children understand financial management, domestic administration, and the practical challenges faced by families of limited means. They accompanied her on visits to hospitals, orphanages, and working-class neighborhoods in Darmstadt, witnessing social conditions that most European royalty never encountered directly. The household operated according to schedules that balanced formal education with practical training, religious instruction with charitable work, and family time with official duties. This structure reflected Alice's belief that royal birth created obligations to serve others rather than privileges to be enjoyed in isolation. Between 1863 and 1878, Alice bore 7 children who would carry these principles into their own adult lives and marriages. Their names, Victoria, Elizabeth, Irene, Ernest Louis, Friedrich, Alex, and Marie, reflected the complex political and family relationships that connected German states with British royal traditions, Russian imperial ambitions, and the emerging challenges of modern European diplomacy. Princess Victoria of Hesse was born on April 5, 1863, at the New Palace in Darmstadt. As Alice's eldest child and first daughter, Victoria inherited both responsibility and expectation. Her birth occurred during a period of relative stability for the young Hessian court, before the family tragedies that would later define her upbringing. Victoria received the names Victoria Alberta Elizabeth Matilda Marie in honor of her grandmother Queen Victoria and deceased grandfather Prince Albert. From birth, she occupied a unique position as the link between British royalty and the rising generation of German princes and princesses. Alice raised Victoria according to principles that differed markedly from traditional royal education. Victoria learned practical domestic skills alongside classical languages. She studied history through direct engagement with documents and artifacts, rather than mere memorization of dates and dynasties. The princess developed fluency in English, German, and French during childhood. She accompanied her mother on charitable visits to hospitals and orphanages in Darmstadt, witnessing social conditions that most royalty never encountered. This exposure to ordinary life became a defining characteristic of Alice's child-rearing philosophy. Victoria's education included natural sciences, contemporary literature, and basic mathematics. She learned to manage household accounts and understand the practical aspects of domestic administration. These skills would prove valuable in her later life as a naval officer's wife. The death of Victoria's younger brother Friedrich in 1873 marked the beginning of a series of family tragedies. Victoria, then 10 years old, witnessed her mother's grief and the household's struggle to comprehend the implications of hemophilia within their family line. In December 1878, diphtheria struck the household. Victoria contracted the disease along with most of her siblings. She recovered, but her younger sister Marie died on November 16th. Their mother Alice succumbed to the same disease on December 14th, exactly 17 years after Prince Albert's death. At 15, Victoria suddenly found herself the eldest surviving daughter in a household without its guiding figure. Queen Victoria assumed oversight of her Hessian grandchildren, but Victoria bore practical responsibility for supporting her younger siblings through the transition. On April 30th, 1884, Victoria married Prince Louis of Battenberg at Darmstadt. The match represented both personal affection and strategic alliance. Louis, born in 1854, was the son of Prince Alexandra of Hesse and by Rhine and Julia von Hocke, a Polish countess elevated to morganatic nobility. The Battenberg family occupied a unique position in European nobility. Though of princely rank, they remained excluded from the highest levels of German aristocracy due to the morganatic nature of Louis's parents' marriage. This status would later prove politically significant. Victoria's marriage brought her into the British sphere of influence. Prince Louis pursued a career in the Royal Navy, making Victoria a naval wife who would spend years moving between posting and posting across the British Empire. As Princess Louis of Battenberg, Victoria mastered the complex social requirements of naval society while managing a peripatetic lifestyle that spanned 3 decades. She established households in Malta during Louis's Mediterranean Command, Gibraltar during his tenure as Director of Naval Intelligence, and various British ports including Portsmouth, Plymouth, and Chatham as his career progressed through the Royal Navy hierarchy. Louis advanced steadily through naval ranks, serving as 4th Sea Lord from 1902 to 1905, 2nd Sea Lord from 1912 to 1914, and briefly as 1st Sea Lord in 1914 before anti-German sentiment forced his resignation despite his decades of loyal service. Victoria supported his career while managing the social complexities of being a German princess married to a naturalized British officer during a period of increasing Anglo-German tension. Victoria maintained extensive correspondence with royal relatives across Europe, creating an informal intelligence network that proved valuable to British foreign policy. Her letters provide detailed accounts of the changing political landscape of the 1880s and 1890s, including insights into German imperial court dynamic, Russian royal family tensions, and the complex web of marriages that connected European nobility. She served as an informal diplomatic channel between British, German, and Russian courts, particularly valuable given her sister's marriages into the Prussian and Russian imperial families. This position allowed her to provide British policymakers with private information about continental political developments while maintaining family relationships across national boundaries. The princess adapted successfully to the practical demands of military life, demonstrating remarkable organizational skill and social flexibility. Unlike many royal wives who remained in fixed residences, Victoria managed household moves across multiple countries, supervised her children's education during frequent relocations, and maintained social connections with naval families, diplomatic communities, and royal relatives across Europe and the Mediterranean. Victoria and Louis had 4 children: Alice, born 1885, Louise, born 1889, George, born 1892, and Louis, born 1900. Each child would play significant roles in 20th-century European history. Alice married Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark in 1903. Their son Philip would eventually marry Princess Elizabeth, later Queen Elizabeth II, connecting Victoria's line directly to the modern British royal family. Louise became Queen of Sweden through marriage to Crown Prince Gustav Adolf in 1923. George inherited his father's naval interests and served with distinction in both world wars. Louis became Earl Mountbatten of Burma, achieving prominence as a naval commander and last Viceroy of India. Victoria lived to see her grandson Prince Philip's naval career and engagement to Princess Elizabeth in 1947. Her death in 1950 came just 3 years before Elizabeth's coronation as Queen Elizabeth II. The Mountbatten name, adopted by the family during World War I, became synonymous with British naval tradition and imperial administration. Through her children and grandchildren, Victoria connected the houses of Hesse, Battenberg, Greece, Sweden, and ultimately Windsor. Victoria's longevity, she lived to 87, allowed her to witness the transformation of European monarchy from the imperial system of her youth to the constitutional arrangements of the mid-20th century. Her descendants occupied positions of influence throughout this transition. Princess Elizabeth was born on November 1, 1864, receiving the names Elizabeth Alexandra Louise Alice. Known within the family as Ella, she was Alice's second daughter and demonstrated artistic talents from early childhood. Ella's birth occurred during a period of relative happiness for Alice and Louis. The young family had established itself successfully at Darmstadt, and the early 1860s represented a time of optimism before the personal and political upheavals that would follow. As the second daughter, Ella occupied a less formal position than Victoria, but enjoyed greater freedom to develop her individual interests. She showed particular aptitude for music, languages, and fine arts. Ella distinguished herself as the most traditionally beautiful of Alice's daughters. Contemporary accounts describe her classical features, graceful bearing, and natural elegance. These attributes, combined with her royal lineage, made her a sought-after marriage partner among European nobility. During her teenage years, Ella demonstrated deep religious conviction and charitable interest. She participated actively in her mother's philanthropic work, visiting hospitals and supporting educational initiatives for working-class families in Hesse. The princess developed particular skill in nursing and medical assistance. Her training in practical health care would later prove valuable during her work with wounded soldiers and charitable institutions in Russia. On June 15, 1884, Ella married Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich of Russia, the fifth son of Tsar Alexander II. The ceremony took place at the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg with appropriate imperial magnificence. Grand Duke Sergei served as Governor-General of Moscow, making Ella one of the most prominent figures in Russian society. The marriage brought significant political advantages for both the German and Russian courts. Strengthening the alliance between the imperial families, Ella converted from Lutheranism to Russian Orthodoxy following her marriage, taking the name Elizabeth Fyodorovna. This conversion reflected genuine religious conviction rather than mere political convenience. As Grand Duchess Elizabeth Fyodorovna, Ella established herself as one of the most influential and beloved figures in Moscow society during the late imperial period. Her position as wife to the Governor-General placed her at the center of the ancient capital's social, cultural, and charitable networks. She supervised extensive charitable works that reflected both German organizational efficiency and Russian Orthodox spirituality. Her initiatives included the creation of modern hospitals equipped with the latest medical technology, orphanages that provided education as well as shelter, and educational institutions specifically designed to provide women with practical skills and professional training. The Grand Duchess became particularly associated with the Martha and Mary Convent of Mercy, which she founded in 1909 after years of planning and preparation. This institution represented a revolutionary approach to Orthodox religious life, combining traditional monastic devotion with practical social work, medical care, and educational services. The convent operated according to principles that Ella developed after extensive study of both Western charitable models and Orthodox spiritual traditions. Sisters provided nursing care in local hospitals, operated schools for working-class children, and maintained workshops that provided employment for women in difficult circumstances. Ella's conversion to Russian Orthodoxy in 1891, 7 years after her marriage, reflected genuine spiritual conviction rather than mere political convenience. She studied Orthodox theology intensively, learned Church Slavonic, and participated actively in religious observances. Her conversion created some tension with her German Protestant relatives, but strengthened her position within Russian society. Her charitable work extended beyond Moscow to rural areas throughout the empire, where she supported agricultural education, medical clinics, and rural development projects. During times of crisis, Including the Russo-Japanese War and the 1905 Revolution, her charitable network provided crucial support for refugees, wounded soldiers, and displaced families. On February 17, 1905, Grand Duke Sergei was assassinated by revolutionary terrorists in Moscow. The bomb attack occurred near the Kremlin, killing Sergei instantly and devastating Ella emotionally. Following her husband's death, Ella dedicated herself entirely to religious life and charitable work. She founded the Martha and Mary Convent of Mercy in Moscow, serving as its abbess and establishing a new model for Orthodox religious communities. The Grand Duchess sold her personal jewelry and possessions to fund charitable institutions. She adopted the lifestyle of a religious sister while maintaining her imperial rank and continuing to participate in court ceremonial when required. Following the February Revolution of 1917, Ella refused opportunities to leave Russia despite growing danger to members of the imperial family. She remained committed to her charitable work and religious community even as political conditions deteriorated. On May 7, 1918, Ella was arrested by Bolshevik authorities along with other members of the Romanov family. She was transported to Alapeyevsk, a small town in the Ural Mountains, where she was held under guard. On July 18, 1918, Ella and other prisoners were murdered by their captors. They were thrown alive into an abandoned mine shaft. Reports indicate that Ella survived the initial fall and attempted to comfort fellow prisoners before succumbing to her injuries. The Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia canonized Ella as a martyr in 1981. The Moscow Patriarchate followed with canonization in 1992, recognizing her as St. Elizabeth the New Martyr. Ella's relics were eventually recovered and transferred to Jerusalem, where they rest in the Church of Mary Magdalene on the Mount of Olives. The location reflects her connection to the Holy Land and her commitment to religious pilgrimage. The Martha and Mary Convent continues to operate in Moscow, maintaining Ella's tradition of combining religious devotion with practical, charitable work. Her model influenced Orthodox social action throughout the 20th century. Princess Irene was born on July 11, 1866, receiving the names Irene, Louise, Marie, Anne. As Alice's third daughter, she grew up in an increasingly complex household environment marked by both privilege and underlying anxiety about hereditary health conditions. Irene's early childhood coincided with growing awareness within the family of hemophilia's presence in their bloodline. This knowledge influenced Alice's approach to child rearing and created an atmosphere of cautious optimism mixed with medical vigilance. The princess developed close relationships with her siblings, particularly her younger brother Ernest Louis. Contemporary family letters describe Irene as gentle, intelligent, and naturally diplomatic in her interactions with both family members and court officials. On May 24, 1888, Irene married Prince Heinrich of Prussia, the younger brother of Kaiser Wilhelm II. The ceremony took place at Charlottenburg Palace, cementing an important alliance between the Hessian and Prussian courts. Prince Heinrich pursued a career in the Imperial German Navy, eventually rising to the rank of Grand Admiral. His marriage to Irene connected the Hessian family directly to the heart of German imperial power during its period of greatest influence. The marriage represented both personal compatibility and strategic advantage. Irene's gentle nature complemented Heinrich's naval focus, while their union strengthened political bonds between the various German states under Prussian leadership. As Princess Heinrich of Prussia, Irene occupied a prominent position within the German imperial court during the height of the Second Reich's power and influence. Her marriage connected her directly to Kaiser Wilhelm II through her brother-in-law relationship, placing her at the center of German imperial society during its most confident and expansionist period. Irene participated in major state occasions, including imperial receptions, military reviews, naval ceremonies, and diplomatic functions that showcased German power to European courts and foreign delegations. Her position required sophisticated understanding of court protocol, international diplomacy, and the complex web of relationships that connected German aristocracy with royal families across Europe. She established primary residences in Berlin at the imperial court and in Kiel, the Baltic naval port that served as headquarters for Heinrich's maritime responsibilities. The Kiel residence connected her closely with German naval development, including the ambitious fleet expansion programs that characterized Wilhelm II's reign and contributed to pre-war Anglo-German tensions. The princess became closely associated with naval wives organizations that supported German maritime expansion and provided social services for naval families. These organizations reflected the militaristic culture that dominated German imperial society and emphasized the connection between naval power and national prestige. Irene maintained careful political neutrality in the complex disputes and personality conflicts that characterized Wilhelm II's court, demonstrating diplomatic skill that allowed her to preserve family relationships while avoiding involvement in court intrigues. Her position required constant navigation between competing factions, personal rivalries, and policy disputes that marked the later years of Wilhelm II's reign. Her role as intermediary between her British family connections and German imperial society became increasingly delicate as Anglo-German relations deteriorated in the years leading to World War I. She maintained correspondence with British relatives while supporting German imperial policies, a balance that required considerable personal and political sophistication. Irene and Heinrich had 3 sons: Waldemar, born 1889, Sigismund, born 1896, and Heinrich, born 1900. The birth of each son brought anxiety about potential hemophilia inheritance. Waldemar showed no signs of the condition and lived to adulthood, serving in World War I and surviving until 1945. Sigismund died in infancy in 1896. Heinrich died at age 4 in 1904, with some sources suggesting hemophilia-related complications. The loss of 2 sons devastated Irene and influenced her later withdrawal from some court activities. She focused increasingly on supporting medical research and institutions dedicated to children's health. World War I brought particular challenges for Irene due to her British connections. Her sisters, Victoria and Alex, found themselves on opposing sides of the conflict, creating painful family divisions. Following Germany's defeat and the abdication of Wilhelm II, Irene and Heinrich faced the loss of their imperial status and positions. They adapted to reduced circumstances while maintaining their marriage and family relationships. During the Nazi period, Irene lived quietly in Germany, avoiding political involvement while maintaining connections with surviving family members. Her son Waldemar served in World War II, continuing the family's military traditions under drastically changed circumstances. Irene died on November 11, 1953, at Himmelmark in Schleswig-Holstein. Her death marked the end of the direct connection between Alice's children and the German imperial system. Through her son Waldemar, Irene's line continued into the latter half of the 20th century. However, the Prussian royal family's loss of political power meant that her descendants occupied primarily ceremonial positions. Irene's life spanned the entire period of German imperial power, from its establishment under Wilhelm I through its destruction in 2 world wars. Her experience reflected the broader transformation of European monarchy from political institution to historical memory. Prince Ernest Louis was born on November 25, 1868, as the only surviving son of Alice and Louis IV. His birth ensured the continuation of the Hesse-Darmstadt dynasty and placed enormous expectations on the young prince from his earliest years. Ernest Louis received the names Ernest Louis Charles Albert William, reflecting both German and British influences in his upbringing. As the designated heir to the Grand Duchy of Hesse and by Rhine, his education emphasized statecraft, military science, and cultural patronage. The prince's position as the only male heir created particular pressure following the deaths of his younger brother Friedrich in 1873 and sister Marie in 1878. These losses intensified focus on his survival and eventual succession. Ernest Louis was 5 years old when Friedrich died from hemophilia-related injuries. He was 10 when both Marie and his mother Alice succumbed to diphtheria in 1878. These early experiences with death shaped his personality and worldview profoundly. Contemporary accounts describe Ernest Louis as sensitive, artistic, and occasionally melancholic. He developed a deep interest in music, theater, and visual arts that distinguished him from the more military-focused traditions of German royalty. Queen Victoria took particular interest in her grandson's upbringing, ensuring that he received appropriate preparation for his future role while also supporting his artistic inclinations. This British influence balanced the Germanic emphasis on military training and state responsibility, Ernest Louis succeeded his father as Grand Duke of Hesse, and by Rhine on March 13, 1892, at age 23. His accession occurred during a period of relative stability in German politics, before the upheavals that would characterize the early 20th century. The young Grand Duke demonstrated immediate commitment to cultural development and social reform within his territories. He supported artistic institutions, educational initiatives, and infrastructure improvements that modernized the Grand Duchy. Ernest Louis established the Darmstadt Artists' Colony in 1899, bringing together architects, designers, and craftsmen to create new approaches to art and design. This initiative reflected his commitment to cultural innovation and practical aesthetic education. On April 19, 1894, Ernest Louis married his first cousin, Princess Victoria Melita of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, known as Duchy. The marriage was encouraged by Queen Victoria but proved personally incompatible from the beginning. The couple had one daughter, Elizabeth, born in 1895, but their marriage deteriorated rapidly due to fundamental personality differences and incompatible expectations. Victoria Melita preferred the social life of larger courts, while Ernest Louis focused on cultural and artistic pursuits. In 1901, Ernest Louis and Victoria Melita divorced, creating scandal within the closely connected network of European royalty. The divorce required complex negotiations regarding custody, financial arrangements, and future marriage possibilities for both parties. On February 2, 1905, Ernest Louis married Princess Eleanor of Solms-Hohensolms-Lich. This second marriage proved much more successful, producing two sons, George Donatus, born 1906, and Louis, born 1908. As Grand Duke, Ernest Louis distinguished himself as one of Europe's most innovative cultural patron rulers, transforming the small Grand Duchy of Hesse into an internationally recognized center for artistic experimentation and architectural innovation. His approach to governance emphasized cultural development as a means of social progress and economic modernization. The Grand Duke's most lasting achievement was the establishment and development of the Mathildenhöhe Artists' Colony in Darmstadt, begun in 1899 with the invitation of 7 leading artists and architects to create a permanent artistic community. The project reflected his vision of integrating art with daily life, breaking down traditional barriers between fine art and practical design. The colony attracted prominent figures including Peter Behrens, who would later become a pioneering industrial designer, and Joseph Maria Olbrich, the Viennese architect who designed the colony's landmark buildings, including the distinctive wedding tower that became a symbol of Darmstadt's cultural renaissance. Ernest Louis commissioned numerous architectural projects throughout his reign, including the renovation of the Darmstadt Palace, the construction of new administrative buildings that incorporated innovative design principles, and the development of worker housing projects that emphasized both aesthetic appeal and practical functionality. His support for the decorative arts extended beyond architecture to include furniture design, metalwork, ceramics, and textile production. The Grand Duke established workshops and training programs that provided practical artistic education while developing new approaches to mass production that maintained artistic quality. The cultural programs initiated by Ernest Louis attracted international attention, bringing visitors and students to Darmstadt from across Europe and America. The exhibitions organized by the Artists' Colony, particularly the landmark 1901 and 1908 exhibitions, showcased new approaches to domestic design and architectural innovation that influenced modern design movements throughout Europe. Ernest Louis also supported progressive social welfare initiatives that reflected his belief in culture as a means of social improvement. These programs included expanded educational opportunities that emphasized practical and artistic training, improved housing for workers that incorporated modern design principles, and healthcare reforms that brought medical care closer to rural and working-class populations. The collapse of the German Empire in November 1918 forced Ernest Louis to abdicate his throne along with other German monarchs. He formally relinquished his powers on November 9, 1918, ending over 6 centuries of Hessian independence. The abdication process was managed peacefully, with Ernest Louis cooperating with revolutionary authorities to ensure orderly transition. He retained personal property and private status while losing all governmental authority. Following abdication, Ernest Louis focused entirely on family life and artistic pursuits. He maintained residences in Darmstadt and supported various cultural institutions as a private citizen rather than ruling monarch. Ernest Louis spent his final years managing family estates and supporting his children's education and careers. He witnessed the rise of Nazi Germany with concern, but avoided direct political involvement. The former Grand Duke died on October 9, 1937, at Langen in Hesse. His death occurred just months before the tragic airplane crash that killed his eldest son, George Donatus, daughter-in-law, Cecilia, and 2 grandchildren. Historical assessment of Ernest Louis emphasizes his cultural contributions rather than political achievements. His support for artistic innovation and architectural experimentation left lasting influence on German cultural development, particularly in the decorative arts and community planning. Prince Friedrich was born on October 7, 1870, during the Franco-Prussian War. His birth brought joy to the Hessian household, as he was Alice and Louis's second son, and seemed to ensure the dynasty's continuation. Friedrich received the names Friedrich Wilhelm August Victor Leopold Ludwig in honor of various German royal ancestors. Known within the family as Friddy, he developed normally during his first months of life, showing no immediate signs of health problems. The prince's early development followed typical patterns for royal infants. He reached standard milestones for sitting, walking, and early speech. Contemporary family letters describe him as active, curious, and physically robust. As Friedrich began walking and exploring his environment, family members noticed unusual bruising and bleeding from minor injuries. These symptoms initially appeared as childhood clumsiness rather than signs of serious medical condition. Medical consultation revealed that Friedrich had inherited hemophilia from the royal bloodline. This diagnosis confirmed fears that Alice had carried the condition from her mother, Queen Victoria, who had transmitted it to several of her children and grandchildren. The hemophilia diagnosis transformed daily life for Friedrich and his family. Normal childhood activities became potentially dangerous, requiring constant supervision and careful management of physical risks. On May 29, 1873, Friedrich was playing in his mother's bedroom when he fell from a window onto the terrace below. The fall would not have seriously injured a healthy child, but Friedrich's hemophilia made internal bleeding fatal. Friedrich died from his injuries, becoming one of the first documented cases of hemophilia fatality within Queen Victoria's extended family. His death at age 2 years and 7 months devastated Alice and influenced her approach to raising her surviving children. The accident occurred despite careful precautions taken by the household. Its unexpected nature highlighted the unpredictable risks faced by hemophiliac children in an era before modern medical intervention. The loss of Friedrich deeply affected the entire family dynamic. Alice's grief influenced her increased focus on charitable work and practical education for her surviving children. The tragedy also reinforced awareness of hemophilia's presence in their bloodline, affecting marriage considerations for future generations. Princess Alex was born on June 6, 1872, receiving the names Alex, Victoria, Helena, Louise, Beatrice. As Alice's youngest daughter, she grew up in a household increasingly marked by loss and the shadow of hereditary illness. Alex's early years were shaped by the recent death of her brother Friedrich and growing awareness of hemophilia within the family. This knowledge created an atmosphere of protective concern that influenced her upbringing and personality development. The princess demonstrated strong-willed characteristics from childhood. Contemporary accounts describe her as intelligent, serious, and occasionally stubborn. These traits would later influence her approach to imperial responsibilities and family life. The diphtheria outbreak of 1878 marked the most traumatic period of Alex's childhood. At age 6, she witnessed the deaths of both her sister Marie and mother Alice within weeks of each other. Following Alice's death, Queen Victoria assumed primary responsibility for Alex's upbringing. The young princess spent significant periods at Windsor Castle and other British royal residences, developing strong connections to British royal traditions. Queen Victoria's influence shaped Alex's religious views, social attitudes, and understanding of royal duty. The Queen's protective approach also reinforced Alex's tendency toward shyness and discomfort with large social gatherings. On November 26, 1894, Alex married Nicholas II, who had recently become Tsar of Russia following his father's unexpected death. The marriage ceremony took place in St. Petersburg amid the formal mourning period for Alexander III. The marriage transformed Alex into Empress Alexandra Feodorovna through conversion to Russian Orthodoxy. This religious change reflected genuine conviction rather than mere political convenience, influencing her later approach to Russian imperial responsibilities. The timing of the marriage, occurring immediately after Alexander III's death, meant that Alex assumed imperial duties without the typical period of adjustment usually available to royal brides. This circumstance contributed to her initial difficulties with Russian court society. As Empress Alexandra Feodorovna, Alex struggled with the complex requirements of Russian court life, which demanded constant public appearances, elaborate ceremonial functions, and sophisticated management of competing noble factions. Her natural shyness and preference for family privacy conflicted sharply with expectations for public social leadership and the ceremonial requirements of autocratic rule. The Russian court system, inherited from centuries of Byzantine and Muscovite tradition, required the empress to maintain formal relationships with hundreds of noble families, foreign diplomats, and court officials. Alexandra found these requirements exhausting and often retreated to private family life, creating resentment among court society and contributing to her reputation as cold and foreign. Alexandra and Nicholas had 5 children over a 9-year period: Grand Duchess Olga, born 1895, Grand Duchess Tatiana, born 1897, Grand Duchess Maria, born 1899, Grand Duchess Anastasia, born 1901, and finally Tsarevich Alexei, born 1904. The birth of 4 daughters before the male heir created constitutional succession anxiety and intensified political pressure on the imperial marriage. The imperial family developed an unusually close and informal domestic life that contrasted sharply with traditional Russian imperial protocol. Alexandra insisted on personally caring for her children rather than delegating their upbringing to court officials and tutors. This hands-on approach reflected lessons learned from her own upbringing under Queen Victoria's supervision. The birth of Alexei in 1904 brought both dynastic fulfillment and medical terror to the imperial family. When the Tsarevich inherited hemophilia from Alexandra's bloodline, recreating the same challenges that had affected her brother Friedrich and other relatives, the discovery created a family crisis with profound political implications. Alexandra's desperate focus on Alexei's health led directly to her association with Grigory Rasputin, a Siberian mystic who demonstrated apparent ability to help during the boy's life-threatening medical crises. Whether through hypnosis, herbal remedies, or psychological influence, Rasputin's interventions seemed to provide relief when conventional medical treatment failed. The relationship with Rasputin seriously damaged the imperial family's reputation and political standing among both court nobility and the general population. Rumors about the nature of Alexander's relationship with the mystic, combined with his influence over imperial appointments and policy decisions, undermined the monarchy's moral authority during the crucial period leading to World War I. Alexandra's German heritage became a particular liability during World War I, when anti-German sentiment created suspicion about her loyalty to Russia. Despite her genuine commitment to Russian Orthodox faith and imperial duty, popular opinion increasingly viewed her as a foreign influence undermining Russian military effectiveness and political stability. The February Revolution of 1917 forced Nicholas II to abdicate, ending centuries of Romanov rule. Alexandra and her family were initially held under house arrest at Tsarskoye Selo before being transferred to Tobolsk in Siberia. In April 1918, the family was moved to Ekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains, where they were held in the Ipatiev house under increasingly harsh conditions. Local Bolshevik authorities assumed responsibility for their imprisonment. On July 17, 1918, Alexandra, Nicholas, and their 5 children were murdered by their captors in the basement of the Ipatiev house. The execution ended the immediate line of the Romanov dynasty and completed the Bolshevik consolidation of power. Alexandra's death ended her direct bloodline, as all 5 of her children perished with their parents. However, her siblings and their descendants continued to influence European history throughout the 20th century. The hemophilia gene that Alexandra carried died with her son Alexei, removing this particular manifestation of the condition from the royal bloodlines. Contemporary genetic analysis has confirmed the presence of the mutation in remains identified as belonging to the imperial family. Alexandra's correspondence and diary entries, preserved despite the chaotic circumstances of her final years, provide detailed insight into the collapse of imperial Russia and the personal experience of revolutionary upheaval from an aristocratic perspective. Princess Marie was born on May 24, 1874, as Alice's youngest child and seventh daughter. Her birth completed the family constellation that had begun with Victoria's arrival 11 years earlier. Marie received the names Marie Victoria Feodor Leopoldine, honoring both German and British royal connections. As the youngest daughter, she occupied a cherished position within the family, but also faced the accumulated anxieties about health and inheritance that marked her siblings' upbringing. The princess's early years unfolded during a period of relative stability for the Hessian household. Alice had established her child-rearing principles, and the family had adapted to the realities of royal life in a small German state. In November 1878, diphtheria struck the Hessian household with devastating effect. Marie contracted the disease along with most of her siblings, but her young immune system proved unable to fight the infection effectively. Marie died on November 16, 1878, at age 4 years and 5 months. Her death preceded her mother's by less than a month, beginning the sequence of tragedies that would devastate the family and reshape the survivors' lives. The loss of Marie affected Alice profoundly, contributing to the emotional exhaustion that may have weakened her resistance to the same disease. Contemporary accounts describe Alice's desperate attempts to care for her children while fighting her own illness. Alice's care for Marie during her final illness exemplified the hands-on approach to motherhood that had characterized her parenting style. Despite medical advice to maintain distance from infected family members, Alice insisted on nursing her children personally. The emotional toll of Marie's death, combined with physical exhaustion from caring for sick family members, left Alice vulnerable to the diphtheria infection that would claim her life on December 14, 1878. Marie's death thus marked the beginning of the end for Alice's immediate family structure. The loss of both youngest daughter and mother within weeks created trauma that influenced the surviving children throughout their lives. The timing of these deaths, Marie on November 16th, Alice on December 14th, created a compressed period of grief that became central to family memory and identity among the survivors. 7 children began this story. 2 died in childhood: Friedrich from hemophilia-related complications in 1873, Marie from diphtheria in 1878. 5 reached adulthood and assumed positions of significant influence within European monarchy. Victoria married into the Battenberg family, connecting her line to British naval tradition and eventually to the modern House of Windsor through her grandson, Prince Philip. Elizabeth became a Russian Grand Duchess, converted to Orthodoxy, and died as a martyr during the Bolshevik Revolution. Irene married into the Prussian royal family, experiencing both the heights of German imperial power and its complete collapse after World War I. Ernest Louis ruled the Grand Duchy of Hesse until revolution forced his abdication, leaving lasting contributions to German cultural development. Alex became Empress of Russia, bore the last Tsarevich, and died with her entire immediate family during the Russian Revolution. Her hemophilia inheritance influenced Russian politics through Rasputin's involvement and ended with her son's execution. Through marriage and inheritance, Alice's children occupied some of Europe's most significant thrones. Alex ruled the Russian Empire during its final turbulent years. Ernest Louis governed Hesse until the German monarchical system collapsed. Elizabeth held prominent position within Russian imperial society before choosing religious life. All 3 thrones were lost through revolution. The Russian Empire fell to Bolshevism in 1917. The German Empire collapsed in 1918, taking the various German monarchies with it. None of Alice's children's direct lines survived as ruling dynasties beyond World War I. Alex's line ended completely with the murder of the Russian imperial family in 1918. Elizabeth left no children, ending her particular branch. Ernest Louis's male line continued but lost political significance after his abdication. Victoria's line proved most consequential for the long term. Through her children and grandchildren, particularly through Prince Philip's marriage to Queen Elizabeth II, Alice's bloodline entered the modern British royal family and influenced thus the constitutional monarchy that survived the upheavals of the 20th century. Princess Alice died at 35, believing she had failed to adequately prepare her children for the challenges they would face. The scope of political upheaval that would reshape Europe within 40 years of her death exceeded anything she could have anticipated when establishing her household principles at Darmstadt. The revolutions that swept across Europe between 1917 and 1919 destroyed the monarchical system that had provided the framework for her children's lives and expectations. The Russian Empire collapsed into civil war and Bolshevik dictatorship. The German Empire fragmented into republican states. The Austro-Hungarian Empire disintegrated entirely. Within 5 years, the entire political structure of Central and Eastern Europe had been transformed. Yet through her progressive approach to child-rearing, her emphasis on practical education and charitable service, and her insistence on understanding ordinary life beyond court society, Alice inadvertently prepared her children for the extraordinary circumstances they would encounter. Her educational philosophy emphasized adaptability, service to others, and personal resilience over traditional royal prerogatives and ceremonial expectations. Their ability to maintain dignity during revolution and exile, to adapt to dramatically reduced circumstances, and to continue serving others despite personal loss reflected lessons learned in the Darmstadt household, where Alice had emphasized character development over social privilege. Victoria's successful transition to British naval society, Elizabeth's religious commitment during Russian upheaval, Ernest Louis's cultural achievements during political instability, and even Alex's dedication to family during imperial crisis, all demonstrated the practical value of Alice's unconventional approach to royal upbringing. The hemophilia inheritance that passed through Alice's bloodline created both personal tragedy and historical consequence. Friedrich's death in 1873 demonstrated the condition's lethality in an age before modern medical intervention. Alex's inheritance of the genetic mutation influenced Russian politics through its impact on Tsarevich Alexei, contributing to the political instability that enabled revolutionary success. The condition's presence in multiple royal bloodlines also influenced marriage patterns and dynastic calculations throughout the period. Alice's 7 children connected the declining world of 19th century monarchy to the uncertain realities of the 20th century through their marriages, their political positions, and their responses to unprecedented challenges. Their collective story encompasses imperial grandeur and revolutionary violence, religious commitment and artistic innovation, political leadership and personal survival through adaptation to radically changed circumstances. The geographic scope of their influence extended across Europe from Britain to Russia, from Prussia to Hesse, creating a network of family relationships that transcended national boundaries and political systems. Even after the monarchical system that had created these connections collapsed, family bonds and shared experiences continued to influence diplomatic relationships and cultural exchange among the emerging nation-states of post-war Europe. This was Princess Alice's unintended but remarkable legacy, not a traditional dynasty that maintained power across generations, but a family tree that helped define the transition from European empire to constitutional democracy. Her short life produced one of the most historically consequential royal family lines of the modern era, demonstrating that effective preparation for leadership often comes through emphasis on character and service rather than privilege and protocol. The facts of their lives require no embellishment beyond the remarkable reality of what they actually accomplished, endured, and ultimately survived. In an age of unprecedented monarchical collapse, Alice's children demonstrated that royal training oriented toward practical service and personal resilience could produce individuals capable of meeting revolutionary challenges with dignity, purpose, and ultimate effectiveness in their chosen spheres of influence.